Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of giving you inspiration, specific takeaway, all that way your creative journey can be just a little bit easier. Now, before I fully get into things, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me. I hope it does to you. So let's get into this. If you've been following me for the past couple of weeks, then you will be aware that I am primarily working on editing the feature film we shot in Colombia. And I've broken up the film into 6 parts, essentially, what I'm calling reels. So 6 reels. Each reel is about 20 minutes of the movie, right? That's what it's ultimately supposed to be. And so far, I finished up reel 3, right? So I'm about halfway done, in theory. Now, what's interesting is, I talked about this last episode, is that each scene in itself and each reel presents a new challenge, new opportunities, because there's ebbs and flows to the film. There's a lot of things that progress and change over time, and so the scenes are not formulaic, right? There's always new elements, and that's been a lot of fun. And the one sort of consistency that is throughout the film is that there's various montages, right? There's scripted scenes, and then there's kind of very visual moments. And I'll just use montages as the encompassing word for that. And, while we had overall, the notion of what was going to be part of the montage and, the beats that we needed to hit, obviously it allowed for us to play with it and how we address those specifics. And so, in a sense, we were filming documentary style where we're like, okay, hey, actors, go off and do this, and we'll just kind of film around you. And so that can lead to, an hour of footage, let's say, just for essentially something that could be, even 30 seconds. And so the challenge really is to figure out what you want to keep, right? Because the beauty is, the way I approach this is, I look at all of, let's say that hour, and I pick out the specific shots that I like, and do it that way. Or of stuff that's we'll just use the word usable. But of course, even when you do that, you end up with 10 minutes of just incredible 5-second shots or something like that, right? And so you kind of have to go through this whittling process, and part of the artistry is, okay, you have these random moments, and how do you create the strongest narrative through that? And that's an art form in itself. So, that's been really fun to tackle. Definitely been the scenes that have taken the longest because, you're really also writing them, right? Whereas with the scripted stuff, you kind of know, A to B to C to D, and all the way until the scene's done. How you want to get there. So that's been really fun to tackle, and in many ways, reel 3. What's interesting now, just tonally, as most things do, even comedies, you start getting into the the crux of the movie, the heart of the movie, and it starts to get serious and things like that. And so that's been reflected in the tone, and it's been fun to play with that and see what's coming up with that, and how to play it in the best ways. The other aspect of it, for me, I like to work at the speed of thought, which is Robert Rodriguez's term, basically the ability to work fast. As soon as an idea hits, seeing that idea implemented, right? That's the idea. The frustrating part this past week has been I also have so much other stuff going on, so the computer's rendering out this or importing that and, uploading whatever. And so that bogged the machine down. And in particular, I was addressing notes from one of our producers. One of the things that's happening as I'm moving forward, one of my story producers is going back and looking at stuff and figuring out ways we can, tighten things, create better moments, and clarify things, yada yada yada. So he's giving me notes, and I'm going back and addressing those. And many of them are quite simple, but just there's this one day in particular, I just had so much going on with the computer that to make like a simple trim of a couple of frames was the biggest headache in the world. And so, sometimes in those moments, you kind of have to just be like, all right, I'm not, the hour that I put into this is not worth it, because it's not going to be as productive as if I just kind of walk away from the machine for a couple of hours. And then, once the background stuff is done, then I can tackle this, and it would take me, 5-10 minutes. So, there was kind of a lot of that happening as well, and whatnot. And Chloe, my dog, agrees. So that was kind of a big component of it. Overall, going back in and looking at what we had, right? So reels 1 and 2, I, through the notes themselves, was able to cut out about 5 minutes already without losing anything of significance, right? A lot of the stuff was, trimming down the montages and things like that. Part of it was I purposely left those a little bit longer so that way everybody could see, okay, what are our options, that I think are the strongest to be able to utilize, and, which ones work even, which ones are your favorites and which ones could you live without. So that was part of it. That was basically the majority of it. We also worked on kind of clarifying the beginning a little bit for the audience, and so just stuff like that. And of course, this is still very early rounds, so it's not like, even as I'm editing, there's a couple of times, I see like, ooh, we could totally make the scene stronger by cutting it here and, just leaving on this line and punctuating it there. But, we're making it as strong as it can be, but it is still an assembly edit. You want to see what was shot as it was intended, and then you kind of can go back in and make those decisions once you see it from start to finish. As always, sound tends to be the hardest. We have, like, one of the things, like, I'm not spending a lot of time leveling things out and so forth, because for me, I'm trying to get to the visuals and the story, knowing that, like, once I isolate mics and select, which character's talking at what moment and phrasing that properly, it'll all come together. So it is a little bit rough in that sense, but for me, I can forgive it and bypass it. But it's always interesting, sound so often overlooked in that sense. But what you want to make sure is you have it filmed in the best possible way that you can. And certain things, for us, will just need to be ADR'd. I mean, no movie escapes that. But as much as we could, we got clean dialogue in the day of. One of the things that we did to help ourselves out was to do an audio-only take as much as possible. So we would run through it, and then afterwards, in a, creating a closed environment, we would just, on the set, just have them run through the dialogue, through the scene, just focusing on audio to make sure we got that. And it's incredibly, like, you would think, like, okay, well, won't the timing of that be different than versus, like, ADR and stuff like that? And it's incredible what you can kind of do. And plus, overall, each take tends to be obviously not the same, but similar enough. And it's just incredible. You can kind of nudge and expand various things to make them match, and you pick the audio take to make sure that it works the best way, and it's more effective than just pure ADR, because ADR, can sound like ADR. Now, of course, if you're unfamiliar with that and have no clue, then it's good, because it means you haven't noticed it within a movie. But what it is when someone goes into a sound booth and they just record dialogue that way, and the problem with that is it sounds very hollow versus you being in an environment, let's say like out in nature, that's going to sound one way. You being in a small closed room, that's going to sound another way. You being in a church, that's going to sound echoey, right? So the reverberation is palpable in that way, and you can only match it so much. That's why having audio directly from the set itself is always the best, and that's why we strive to do that. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been up to in that sense. As part of that, of sound in particular, one of the things, so at the end of each week, I export everything out. So in this case, each reel got exported out because, there were new versions of them. Then I export out a whole string out of the reels collectively, so that way, people can watch it as if it's the movie. And I also now that things are a little bit tighter based on John's notes, I exported out what's called AAFs. So an AAF is basically this file that has all the sound information. So this gets sent to the sound designer, and they open it up and they essentially see my timeline with all the edits that I had made, and they can use it in their sound program. So whether it's Logic, whether it's Adobe Audition, Pro Tools, whatever it may be. And, while obviously so in filmmaking, you want to get to what's called picture lock. It means the visuals are fully locked in. There's going to be no more edits. Therefore, the timing doesn't shift. Now, of course, we are not picture locked. Nowhere near that. But, I think from my experience, one of the interesting, I've noticed a lot of novice filmmakers think that there's ever going to be this magical point of full picture lock, right? Eventually, yes, you have to picture lock a film, but people think you have to do a picture lock and then you do sound and then you do color and score and stuff like that. And it's no, all this stuff technically can be happening simultaneously. Now, of course, that there's going to be changes, and so for me, what's really important is knowing how to track the changes. If stuff gets taken out, if stuff gets added, if stuff gets replaced, right? Even if the timing doesn't change, being able to make sure all of that is properly communicated with the various teams working on this. But for the most part, it's not yes, things will definitely change, and there could be drastic changes here and there. But even if, let's say, a scene gets moved from, minute 60 to minute 45, it doesn't negate the work that went into that, right? So what's nice is it allows the sound team to start really working on this, start coming up with, atmospheric sounds, fixing the audio that is there. And so it's not going to, yes, there might be some work that doesn't end up being used, right? And you can call that wasteful, but the majority of it will, and it's going to set us up in a much better position versus all at the end to scramble, all right, now we've got picture lock. All right, now you got a week to basically put everything together. No, now we have the time to really be more thoughtful with everything. Cleaning up the audio that we do have in terms of the dialogue, putting in sound effects, making it atmospheric, also mixing the music with the dialogue and so forth, right? All these things play into it, and we just have more time to do it in this version. And yes, again, I wouldn't even necessarily call them missteps, but there will be changes. So that's how we're kind of approaching it, right? So overall, that's the movie journey, right? And it's been fun to really sculpt that. I've talked about this before, but the idea of me being able to pull out tricks just with this first assembly that normally I wouldn't even think of until till the very end, in essence. Like, for example, if someone's not talking, right? Like if you're filming over someone's shoulder to somebody else, you can place in the dialogue that you want. If the person you're focusing on is just reacting, right? And you can mix and match however you want. And editing really is the playing of time. And so, for me, I love extending a moment. I love quickening a moment. And not to say like I just do this arbitrarily just because I can. No, it's obviously in service of what the movie dictates and what needs to be in that moment most effective for the audience, what's truest to the characters there, things of that nature. So it's been really fun to utilize that, right? And do that and see just how far I've come as an editor. Even just from my last movie to this movie. And part of that is just I've grown with everything, right? So the way we filmed it is we've upped that. The methodology used in terms of, like I talked about, with sound. Obviously, with the actors, we spent a lot of time rehearsing and talking about it, which we weren't necessarily afforded with my first movie. So all these things play into it, Everyone's really firing on all cylinders. And at the ability that we're able to in this moment, right? And what's obviously like 10 years down the line, we will all have improved, and that's amazing. But it's cool to see that evolution even now, right? So, yeah, been doing that. The other part, filming-wise, is just prepping for the final days of shooting. There's a few scenes that we strategically decided, let's just get back in LA and ease up our days while we were in Colombia. So we will be filming at the start of February, and just kind of getting final stuff. Like most of it's ready, locations are picked, props are here, all that stuff. Flights booked for, my friend Jonathan, who lives in Nashville, who helped me shoot. He's going to fly out again, be a part of this, so his flight's booked. All these different things, right? But now it's just about the minor details to make sure, all that's buttoned up. The other fun part, so my friend Emily Krempholtz, who works with me, particularly in the prose side of things, so, when she was hugely instrumental in my first novel, she had sent me various templates for outlines, and there was one that I gravitated to in particular, and then also took elements of another to create this hybrid, and it helped me now outline because I basically had a whole summary of the whole movie, right? But now, just seeing it laid out, essentially, it's a chapter by chapter outline of what happens and why it happens. And so, I've created 30 chapters, and the target will be around 3,000 words per chapter. And it's interesting to see it in this way, and I'm going to do a video about this so you can directly see it and utilize it for yourself if you'd like, or create a variation of that if you'd like. But it's interesting, kind of mapping it out of, okay, what sort, where there's supposed to be a plot turn, a midpoint, all these various story techniques and various parts of the novel, and seeing it in this way through this outline itself, because the term outline could mean anything, and how you outline, is ultimately up to you. But like, I just found this to be really good because it like lays out, okay, here's where your hook should be, your inciting incident, your first plot point, your midpoint, your climax, all that stuff, right? It was interesting kind of mapping it out and seeing where things fit. And for the most part, I kind of anticipated this. I had like about 3/4 of the book really outlined, and I knew the ending, but there was like, okay, how do we get from this point to the ending? And this outline really helped me do that, which was incredible. And it also, so by seeing like, ooh, I've got like 7 chapters that are just basically blank. How do I get from this chapter where this happens to, here? It was a fun way to look at it. And also it gave me the answers, right? And it also allowed me to bring in characters and strengthen certain stuff because I was able to see it on like this great macro picture. So, that was a very useful tool, and I shot back that outline to Emily and John Comerford, who have been instrumental in terms of the story development of all of this. And I asked them, unless you guys see something glaring that I don't, I think this is enough to get me started. And they're in agreement essentially. And so yeah, now I'm going to start this week as well to write it. My goal is going to be 2 chapters this week. Just 2 chapters. So, 30 chapters. If I go 2 chapters a week, that's not too bad. And of course, like with the movie, that would only get me to a first draft, and there's many revisions to go after that. But you need something to revise, right? Nothing happens until you have something laid out. And so, much like with the movie, it's going to be a lot easier to make those changes versus if there's nothing to change. So I'm really excited for that. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I've been up to. I've also got I've been doing some fun interviews that I've posted, like Jen Golden and Eric Owusu, but I've got some other exciting interviews coming up. One's in the immediate future, one's a little bit down the line, but that's also been fun. And also, I'd be remiss, as a board member of the Financially Fit Foundation workshops for the new year begin this weekend. So if you're unfamiliar with the Financially Fit Foundation, it's a nonprofit organization with an aim to help you spend in alignment with your values, not your ego. And what that truly means is that, you have the whole world kind of pulling at you of how you should spend your money. But how do you actually want to spend your money? And it's a question we don't often think about. And, the world is really dictating of how our money needs to, go into materialistic things and other stuff. Now, of course, there's things like rent, food, and the essentials that yes, we have to pay for, and that can be problematic, based on wages and things like that. But this gives you an actual foundation to save your money and then figure out how you actually want to spend your money, right? And it's not a bullshit program. It's completely free. We don't charge you for anything. So the workshops are there for you. They start this weekend. If you go to financiallyfitfoundation.org, you can sign up. And like I said, it's free. If you prefer, there's a book available to purchase that teaches you this stuff. But yeah, for me, the reason I'm a board member is because this dramatically altered my life for the better when I took these workshops years ago. And when the opportunity came that I could be a board member on it, I jumped at it. And so it's been a fun journey to be a part of it. And I know the good that we're doing in terms of teaching people the stuff that, quite frankly, not many people are teaching them. Yes, there's things about like investing and things like that, but you got to start with the foundations, and no one's really teaching the foundations. Not in this way. I haven't seen it. So, do that. If one of your goals for 2022 is to be better with money, this is your opportunity to do that. And quite frankly, we could all use to be better with money. Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you. As always, if there's any questions or thoughts of your own, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. Likewise, if you would like to have more direct interactions, well, that's what my Patreon is for. Patreon.com/PhilSvitek. It's got bonus content and other ways, for us to interact directly and stuff like that. So if that's your jam, check it out. And also, as I've been talking about, I've got various projects that I'm working on, but ones that I've also finished. So if you're curious about my first movie, my first novel, if you want to purchase some merch or whatever, all that stuff is in the description and, helps me out to be able to continue on and making the stuff that I do. So that way I can come back on these types of episodes and report back and give you some tidbits along the way to help you, right? It's a cyclical relationship in that way. Anyway, I've yapped long enough. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.